From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan, alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianco. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matt, you know what? I'm going to tell you something about my childhood that I've never shared with you. When I was a little boy, I used to love to play with little Legos. I always wanted to be an architect when I grew up. And the kids today, apparently, they also want to be architects, but they want to be software architects. Today on the podcast, we have Brian Childress, software architect, fractional CTO, and frankly, in today's business, Brian Childress is worth his weight in gold. Brian, welcome to the podcast. We really appreciate having you. Walk us through some of the fundamentals a small business should be putting in place if they're looking to use technology in not just running their operations and also scaling their operations.
Yeah, thanks. First, it's great to be here with you guys. Nowadays, almost every business is a technology business. We're using technology in the way that we work, we automate, the way we interact with our customers. And so the way that we bring in technology is critically important for small and medium-sized businesses, all the way up to the big guys. And really, for technology to work, it's important that it has to serve a business purpose. There's got to be a reason that we're bringing it in, that we're going to be interacting with technology day in and day out within our business, so that we can continue to serve our clients more efficiently, more effectively, that we can start to separate ourselves from the competition out there and really make our mark in the marketplace.
Brian, give us like some real life examples so that the small business owner at home can really apply to them. For example, like every quarter I listen to like these, quarterly reports, and, CEOs get on their quarterly meetings, and they'll say, well, Domino's is not a pizzeria anymore. We're a software company that happens to sell pizza. And Starbucks, well, we're not a coffee company anymore. We're a software company that happens to sell coffee. What does that mean? What does it mean that every business owner is now a software play?
Yeah, Capital One had a similar sentiment where they wanted to be the bank that a software company would build, right? They wanted to have that Google presence, an idea within the culture. And really what I think they're trying to say is that we know that technology is driving how we do business, how we interact with our customers, but the value that we can create from the data that we're able to collect and the way that we're able to leverage that data to better serve our customers, to better predict where things are going in the future, that's where I think we're seeing that real adoption towards technology and how it's powering businesses. And so, when we talk about, Domino's not being a pizza company, they're now a technology company, right? The pizza tracker that they created, that's based on technology that is doing the same thing that Amazon is doing as far as telling us when our packages are going to be arriving at our doorstep. It's giving us that information. It's saving us that time. It's just making the way that we live and work that much easier.
So I would imagine that the companies that we've just mentioned probably have huge teams of geniuses like yourself. But how can a mom and pop, a local brick and mortar, how can we apply that same expertise and intelligentsia to their daily operations?
Lou, there's so many fantastic platforms that are coming available now that we can pay with just a simple, fairly inexpensive monthly subscription cost. So if I want to be able to text my clients or my customers to say, hey, we're just confirming your appointment and we'll be there between 9 and 12 today. There's so many platforms that are made available to those small mom and pop businesses that can change the way that they interact with their customers for very inexpensive. And it's really incredible to see because we no longer have to go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to build these custom platforms. We can buy right into those platforms, get them integrated into our business, and start using them and getting that value. I mean, within a few hours, if we know what we're looking for. And I think that's the key piece of it, is we need to know what we're trying to solve for, and then we can go find a great solution.
So what do you say to that one-off, business owner that wants to actually go out there and build his own software, and he doesn't even know where to begin, and he's afraid of getting taken advantage of? He's been down this road a few times. What are a couple key things to make sure that they do if they are definitely want to build their own product?
For me, anytime I come into that situation, I start asking why, almost to the same your 5-year-old would be asking you why, because I really want to understand what is it that they're trying to do with technology. A lot of times in those scenarios, folks are just excited about building an app. They want to say that their company has an app in the app store. Unfortunately, it cost them $70,000 to get there, and their business gets no value out of it. And so I really encourage folks to understand what it is they're trying to do. What is it they're trying to solve? And validate that idea. Is it something that my business needs? Is it something that my customers are going to be willing to pay for? Because if they're not, there's absolutely no reason to go down that road again, especially because we hear all of those horror stories where you hire a freelancer or a development agency and they take 6 or 12 months to build something, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then it just disappears. And the thing you've been basing your entire business on is gone. And that's unfortunate to see, but unfortunately it happens a lot.
So how does a business owner, let's say he's going down that road, how does he protect himself from that as he's hiring a developer?
It's all about ownership. A lot of times, especially for non-technical folks, or, you're not really in that business, you're not in the tech business, but you're using tech to help what it is you do day to day. They kind of see it as magic, right? Technology is just this magical thing that I'm never going to understand. I'm not smart enough. And so they just relinquish all control over to the person that, is a smooth talker, that is able to, seems like they've been able to wrangle that magic, right? And we just hand over everything. We hand over the code. We hand over our intellectual property. For many, we hand over our entire business that we're building upon. We hand it over to some stranger on the other side of the globe. And that's where, I see a lot of challenges. And so the way I try and protect folks is own the code and then give out small bits of access. Own the way, where you're hosting it and your website domain name, all of those things you should own. You should be paying the regular costs for, and you just hand out the limited amount of access that you need for somebody to help, build the website or build the software that you're trying to do.
Okay. So what do you mean by own the code? How does somebody, if I own a plumbing company and I'm building an app, right? And you say own the code, is it stored somewhere? Is it a vault? I mean, in the bank, I know the bank holds my money. I know the brokerage firm holds my stock certificates, right? Where is this code held?
So typically it's in a code repository, just like the bank, just like that security box that you have. It's stored a lot of times in GitHub, right? That's the most common kind of industry leading. That GitHub is something that you, as that plumbing company, should own and maintain. And, if it's something that you don't even want to fool with, then I always encourage folks to bring in a trusted, partner into that, right? As a fractional CTO, that's what I do for a lot of companies. They don't want to fool around with it, right? They know that their business needs it, but they don't want to be the one responsible for it or trying to figure out what the heck it is. And so, but we still need to own it. I don't want to just say, hey, Lou, here you go. Just, do what you want, host it wherever, because usually that's when things go bad. And that person's going to come back and say, hey, man, we just spent all this time. You spent all this money, but I'm going to need a lot more money in order for us to actually get it into production. And they almost hold these companies hostage. And, they completely take all of that away from them. And it's extremely upsetting to see.
So is the code held in a repository, like a vault, right? What would go in there? So I'm naive when it comes to technology. I'll be very honest with you. Is that hosting sites or just the code? Do you need to know where the servers are that it's hosted on? Is GitHub a server? How does that work?
So GitHub is typically where we host the code, right? So just if I was writing a book, I would store that somewhere, that document. And that's all code is, right? It's just a way for you and I to communicate. It just happens that computers can understand that as well, and then transpile it into something that then does something, right? It creates some sort of software. Now from GitHub, then we need to typically host it somewhere. And so there's a ton of different places, right? We hear about AWS or Amazon Web Services, extremely popular. The biggest companies in the world host their software on Amazon. There's a ton of other places that we can host things. If it's a simple website, if it's, a very small application, we've got a lot of choices there. But the code is the thing that's running. The server is where it's running. And then, through the domain name, what I type into my internet browser is how I get to that point.
Okay.
The same if you have a mobile app, it's going to call on those servers that's hosting that code.
Gotcha. So the domain goes to the server, which the code is stored in GitHub as a hosting site for that code. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's kind of those three key components. And if you lose control over any one of those, then you're potentially in big trouble.
So what would you say to the business owner that's already started this process and he didn't set up a GitHub account or doesn't know where it's hosted right now? What are some steps that they should take?
The first step is to try and, this is where you kind of have to be a little bit, careful. It's a bit of a dance because, hopefully the person that is building that website or creating that app for you is understanding and is willing to kind of relinquish control and say, yeah, I don't want this, and hand it back over. Maybe bringing in like another third party person that you can trust, that you can put your hands on to say, hey, help me with this. Help me transition, bring back ownership into something that I can control. And then we'll give out control back to the developer, back to the development agency.
Is it as simple as just transferring the login information to somebody? Or is it you have to actually transfer it out of, open your own GitHub account and transfer it from account to account?
So I got to say, it depends on how things are set up. Typically, there's some sort of transfer that can happen. A lot of times it is, I'm going to copy it from yours over to mine. And then I'm going to, if we're still working together, I'm going to give you a little bit of control back in. But that control is much more contained. You have much more oversight over what is being done and how we're kind of interacting with those things.
So what stops people from, let's say I'm Joe Plumber, right? I build an app. So I give you all the code, but I just built this code, but I have a copy of it somewhere else. And I want to go to sell it to Brian, the plumber down the block. What stops that?
Not much. Being a good ethical person.
Okay.
So if I'm honest, like, yes, it's easy for us to steal code. Any developer working in a big organization, they could steal any of that code. For me, the value is in the execution, right? I can create an app for this plumber and go and sell it to their, plumbing competitor and then sell it to the next one. Sure. Right. And over time, man, karma and all sorts of things will eventually get you. But it's all in that execution, right? Even if I had Spotify's entire code base, how capable am I to be able to create the next Spotify and get it out there and bankrupt them and be the one making all the billions of dollars? It's very, very unlikely. Usually, and that's all before, we start to talk about lawsuits and that sort of thing. So I'm less worried about that. It's more like data, reputation, the stability of my business that I'm banking my software on.
Gotcha.
Now, Brian, most work is derivative, right? Like how many of us are really that sharp and that bright to come up with something that's totally unique, right? I mean, the person that came up with the wheel at one point probably had a rock that was rolling and he built upon that, right? So everything is derivative. When it comes to code and software, how unique does it need to be able to protect it?
It comes back down to the execution. It really doesn't, right? If we look at, the number of CRMs that are out there, or the number of ways that I could have scheduled a meeting with you
They all
guys.
do the same thing with like unique twists, right?
That's it, right? There's just, and it's that version of the wheel that might be a little faster or a little shinier or a little different. That's
Or
all.
Have a better marketing team.
That's it. Yeah. And that's a challenge for us software engineers, is we're basically being asked to create the same thing over and over and over again. So we just try and find new and interesting ways to solve the same exact problem.
Gotcha. No, it makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about what's on everybody's mind and all over the news. Let's talk about AI a little bit and how you see it changing the landscape for SaaS in general, engineers, right? I have my opinions. I think it's going to make engineers that are really good software engineers just a hell of a lot more productive, right? I think it's gonna change a lot of industries, right? I think from what I've seen so far, the unproductive engineers may be out of a job if one good engineer can use the AI and do 3 times his job. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It definitely will. And you're going to start to see even more of a spread between the good developers that are using AI as a tool to supercharge their workflow versus the ones that are just leaning on and not really understanding what is the AI actually producing for me. They're just asking it a question, copying and pasting the result, and just slapping it in there. We're going to see that for a bit longer, but we will see a bit more of a divergence between those good engineers, and it's only going to accelerate. So AI as a tool is, I mean, it's supercharged my workflow. Things that were taking me an hour and a half to kind of put together. Now I can ask a couple simple prompts, and in 3 minutes, I've got a working solution that I can put out there and then move on with my day, move on to the next task. So yeah, it's only going to continue to get better, more refined, and really separate those, the good from the great.
So everybody knows like Chat GPT, right? That's the best use case. People are asking questions like you're saying, "Oh, write me a book, tell me a story. What's the best, I don't know, Chinese food place in here, whatever." It's reading things and spitting it back out to you. What other use cases are you seeing for it inside of small businesses outside of that?
I'm seeing a lot, and I would expect to continue to see a bit more of this. We've got a ton of information inside of our businesses, right? We've got internal wikis, we've got emails and chats, and just tons of information that's been collected over time. Layering on top some of these larger language models on top of that, right? So we're not actually sending that data out to the Chat GPTs of the world, but we're using that same technology and power to understand our business. So in HR, or a manager might be able to ask the AI as if it were the HR manager and get a much better answer of what's the process for hiring? What's the process for, paternity or maternity leave, or things along those lines, where we have tons of just siloed information within organizations. We can now bring it together, and now we can ask questions in our organization in just, a much more powerful way.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot right now because we like to give tactical advice, outside the box things, right? So let's talk about that for a second. Let's say I run for my sales team, right? We have a playbook in sales that we use. However, the sales manager is not being remote. You can't always get the sales manager on the phone right now, right? If you're not in the office, it's a lot easier when you're in the office. How would you build a chat bot that the salesperson said, what do I say to this objection? And it pops up and populates, or gives a strategy. How would that work? Would you layer on? And when you say layer on, do you mean like integrate Chat GPT or something like that? And how do you put the data into the GPT? And is that called an agent? I'm so confused with this stuff.
All of that is true. So not you being confused, but all of those.
No, that's definitely true.
So yeah, that is an agent. Typically we hear them referred to as chatbots or chat agents. Okay. So a lot of times what that looks like is you take that big old playbook, right? That 300-page manual that no one's read all of, load that into basically your own internal version of a Chat GPT. And then I can augment that with other information out there, right? So I can go and ask Chat GPT as well, like, what are the best sales, approaches for, responding to an objection in my sale? I can ask that and apply it to my playbook. And what's really cool that we're seeing is there's much better ability for these agents, for these AIs to learn over time, right? And start to really better understand the context of your business, of the products that you're selling that are unique to you. So it's less like, here's the top 10 ways to deal with a sales objection. And it's more like, here's how we deal with that specific sales objection, because I know what, Lou's response was last week and what the, reception to that response was. Maybe it was actually a win. So the AI is going to kind of prioritize that or favor that as a result much more. And it becomes much more unique to the business the more that we use it. And so we're just continuing to train it the more that we interact with it.
That's awesome. Now, would something like that have to be built custom? Like, or are there like plugins you could buy, or for lack of a better word?
So there are a lot of platforms that are starting to come out where you can do exactly that, where you can start to load in, hey, here's my entire sales playbook. Here's all of my, chat history or something along those lines. Now, I would encourage you to really, really vet those, because you're starting to give all of your internal IP out there, right? If you just dump it into a chat GPT, Lord knows where that information goes, right? So you want to be very careful about ownership here, again, to your data, to your intellectual property. But yeah, there's a lot of platforms out there, and I think that's where we're going to see a lot of adoption over the next, 2-3 years, is how can I bring it into my business? And how can I supercharge my salespeople? How can I make my sales team available 24/7 to be able to answer those questions and to better vet the leads that are coming in, so that when my sales team comes in, they can do what they do best. But the AI has helped us to get there a lot quicker.
Yeah, I love that idea. I love that concept. However, I really don't want to build a chat bot, right? Just like the majority of small businesses out there. But if there's something easy to install, that's the way to go. Do you know any of them that are doing that off the top of your head?
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I've been looking at a bunch of them recently. None far enough to really, know.
So, but what would be the search term on something like that?
Something along, internal large language model, or an internal chat AI agent. Because for me, I would want to be focusing on it. I'm bringing my internal database, or I'm bringing it into my internal database, and I start to just kind of load and layer on more and more. Yep.
No, I like that. When I say I'm confused, I'm always confused with the terminology, right? AI has been around for a while. I think all these algorithms are basically AI in a way, right? But just not, I think it's just being rebranded in a different way.
That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of, to be honest, we really haven't invented anything exceptionally new. We just have, more compute power. We have the ability to infinitely scale with a lot of these public cloud offerings. That has really supercharged how we do technology. But a lot of the patterns and a lot of the ideas and concepts, they aren't that new. A lot of these we were thinking about in the 50s. We just, at that time, we had, computers that were the size of warehouses that had the same processing power of what we have in our pockets today in our mobile phones. So,
Brian, you've got this great knack of making very complex things easy to understand and explain. We appreciate that. Matt, he brought me back to our old days on Wall Street. I remember in one of my businesses, I had a server room, and the server room had to be about 300 square feet. I can't even imagine what those servers and wiring and having a tech guy come once a week just to kind of refresh it and maintain it. And then there was a cooler because the room was so hot. Now I think Matt and I spend $15 a month to accomplish the same goal that probably cost thousands 20 years ago. So it's amazing how far we've come. So Brian, thank you for shedding some light on where technology is helping small business. How much should we as small business owners be concerned with cybersecurity?
I think the bigger you are, the more popular you are, the bigger the target is. And we're seeing it a lot unfortunately, in small and medium-sized businesses, because you don't have the same infrastructure that the big guys have. And it's a lot easier for us to go and, let's say, buy a router off the shelf at Best Buy, plug it right in. We're not going to change any passwords, anything. And now we're completely vulnerable. We're wide open to the internet. We're wide open to everything. And we just start plugging in computers and networks and all of those sorts of things. And so I think it's extremely important for us to be more and more aware, because it's so easy for us to click on a link in an email or to pick up a USB drive and plug it into our work laptop. And now our entire network is infected. So cybersecurity is incredibly important. The same with our growing adoption of like SaaS platforms, right? It's so easy for our marketing team to go and spend $50 a month on a subscription for some random platform, and we just start sending data to them. We have no idea who they are, what they're going to do with our data. We just started sending them everything that we have. And so cybersecurity is just becoming so much more complex for us. There's so many different ways that we could either be taken advantage of, we could completely lose our data, we could, expose our customers' data. So we just have to be really, really cognizant of it.
So what are some good ways for people to protect against that?
Always think about what it is that you're doing. When you're clicking, hey, sign up for this free trial of something, when you're clicking on links and emails and that sort of thing, spending some time like training ourselves as business leaders and then working to train our employees of what is the impact of that. When you place something on a social media platform, what is that doing? We're seeing a lot of proliferation where folks are actually stealing our voices, and then the AIs can mimic our voices. So a lot of the protections that we had before, are going away. So we have to always be diligent about, what we're doing with the data and where we're sending things. And so
Brian, you bring up a really good point. I mean, we could spend all the money in the world, protecting our servers and protecting our computers and protecting our, software. But how do we protect ourselves from the folks that we have sitting between the keyboard and the chair?
That's our biggest risk in any business. It doesn't matter what the company is, what they do. That's that risk. So one is just awareness and training. And, there's a lot of great trainings that we're seeing come out that, again, companies can buy and say, hey, we require you to take this every 6 months or every 12 months, just to continue to kind of be aware of what does a phishing email look like. From there, for me, what I like to do is to really put as many guardrails in place, right? And not like being so restrictive that I can't go, shopping on Amazon on my work computer, during the day, right? We don't want to necessarily create that type of culture, but we want to make sure that, the business is protected. So I would look for, experts in that area that can help a small and medium business beef up their security practices, beef up their network, so that they are at least in a much better place than they would be if they were out on their own.
Now, where do you see most developers being hired from? Because I know we're in a global world these days, right? We had somebody on our show not too long ago that started, basically, I think he was bought out by Fiverr, actually. He started like a Fiverr for developers all around the world and vetted them prior to giving them access to larger corporations. Where were you seeing most of the developers come from these days?
All over. I was working on a project earlier this year, and I think we had developers across 5 different time zones, which was, basically 13 hours of the day. We had folks seeing a ton of folks in like Eastern Europe, Poland, Belarus, a lot of great engineers coming out of there. Latin America, there's a huge group of Latin American developers, Brazil, Uruguay, a lot of fantastic folks there. So I'm working with companies and on teams that, we're spread globally, and we're taking advantage of the amazing talent network that we have spread all around the world. And, kind of depending on what your requirements are from a business standpoint, we can leverage those different developers in those different regions to give us, the best coverage, all the way from Eastern Europe to, out Pacific, we can have folks working and building and growing our business almost around the clock.
That's amazing that this is possible these days. What a time to live, Lou. What a time to live.
It's exciting.
So, Brian, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, get in touch with you on the socials? If anybody has any questions, I'm sure you're going to get reached out to, because I think our audience is a little bit less tech inclined, and you've been able to break things down almost perfectly for me to understand. So that's an amazing feat in its own.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, my last high-tech endeavor was getting to the second level of Pac-Man.
Hey, I'm proud of you.
Thank you, buddy.
So I'm most active on LinkedIn. I encourage folks to find me on there, Brian Childress. Reach out, connect, send me a DM. I'm happy to chat anytime.
Awesome. Brian, thank you so much. One question before I let you run. What is your favorite software of all time?
I think right now, the one I'm using the most is Calendly. So, I'm scheduling interviews, I'm scheduling, podcasts just like this, and just being able to send a link and get, everything kind of set up has been a game changer for me in my business. So that's probably the one I'm using.
And I'm sorry to take up more of your time, but we have to dive a little deeper there. Is it's user friendliness? Is it the fact that it's frictionless? Like, what makes the software, to an expert like you, what makes it good?
I think it's that user experience, that there's no friction. I can send you a link, and as soon as you click, fill out a couple pieces of information, everything else from the text messages and the emails that get sent, the Zoom links that get configured, all of that is just kind of done for us. And, to be fair, I spent some time at Calendly as an architect, so I kind of know how things were built. So there's a lot of complexity that makes that user experience so seamless and so easy.
Oh, so wait a second. We're going a little longer here. We got to break that down, because it's such a simple idea, right? They were just able to execute, right, better than anybody else. And it's so simple to use. I mean, we love using it. I've used other schedulers, but this one works great. The app on the phone, press the button. Who's on my call? Who did I call today? 1, 2, 3. It does everything that you need. And the price point's amazing.
Exactly. And it's those types of software that are really changing small and medium businesses, right? The plumber can now send you a link to schedule your appointment to, come in and do general maintenance. They can, be able to send text messages from that type of platform for, a nominal monthly fee, right? And it's that type of software that we're going to see integrated into a lot more businesses, I think.
So what was the founders of Calendly? I've actually never done any research on them. What was their idea? Just to make scheduling simple, and then everything else was built out after that?
Yeah, he was trying to schedule sales meetings, and how do I do it? And, instead of that back and forth email chain of I'm available these times, and then you respond like, oh, I'm available this time. And then, someone replies, oh, I'm no longer available. So he sought to build a solution. And, I think in many ways was a category leader in that sense, right? When you say Calendly, you know what that is. There are a ton of competitors in that space, but they have, nowhere near the market share and nowhere near that user loyalty that system and that platform actually has.
I love it. Brian, thank you so much. Everybody, it's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.